So today I'm going to be teaching from this little booklet. Parts of this booklet are in this book, Welcome to the Wilderness. There's a section about all the trees in the wilderness and their spiritual meaning. That it's an interesting read. But the way God grows people, it's the same way that he grows trees, or that he created trees to grow. I don't think he's ever created a tree since the first one that he spoke. He created the seed within the tree to produce its own, after its own kind. So the power's in the seed. He's not making trees. This sounds funny, but I don't think he's making babies. I think the same as a tree, he's given us the power to procreate. He's put the seed within us, and that seed is very, very powerful. But in Isaiah 65, verse 22, there's a little line that says, "For as the days of a tree, so shall the days of my people. So shall be the days of my people." So the similarities between us and trees are very, very profound. The trees clap their hands, they worship the Lord. When I first met the Lord, I had such an affinity with trees. I just had such a love. Maybe I had that before, but not the same. I just felt, it sounds funny, but I felt a kind of brotherhood with the trees. And there's lots of verses in the Bible that talk about us being like a tree. The very first Psalm, Psalm 1, verse 3, talks about us being like a tree planted by the waters. Talks about meditating upon the Lord. Jeremiah also, in chapter 17, verses 7 and 8, described us, or compared us to a tree. One of the most profound ones, I think, is in Hosea chapter 14, verse 5. It says, it gives this picture of us being like a lily of the valley on the surface. So a lily of the valley doesn't look like lilies here in America, or I think in Chile. It's a different kind of plant, kind of spreads out, and it grows where nothing grows. And he said, on the surface you'll be like the lily of the valley, but underneath you shall have roots like the cedars of Lebanon. So if you can picture this little plant with these massive cedar tree roots, that's what God's working in us. That's why he's chastening us and disciplining us and narrowing our life, is to produce massive roots. So we don't always see the growth on the surface. Maybe since you've been here, you haven't seen a lot of growth in your life. I see growth, I see change. But what God's really working in you and in me is deep, deep roots. And he does that through dry times. He does that through winter. Winter is more about root growth than it is any other kind of growth. So there's seasons for a tree, well, there's seasons for people. Here in this area, we have 4 seasons. If it was up to me, I would only have one season. It would be fall, it'd be harvest, it'd be fruit. My neighbor he planted a peach tree, and the tree had so much fruit, it almost broke. He had to put a ladder underneath the tree to keep the tree from falling over. And I remember watching that and thinking, God, I'm not sure I want that, because I don't want to break. And he had to prop it up every year. And sometimes there are churches and Christians that have so much fruit that it's hard for them. And I think harvest is the most amazing time of the year. Every season and everything that God does in the tree is for fruit. Everything equals fruit. Whether it's the bark on the tree, the leaves, the roots, the seasons, it doesn't matter what it is, the pruning, all of it equals fruit. He's after fruit. So he spoke of us as disciples. He said it would please your Father as disciples that you bear much fruit. And so he's after fruit in our lives. There are things that kill fruit. Where we live, there's lots of apple trees. And I studied this. I might have heard it. I can't remember where I heard it. But then I saw it. I looked for it. There's a plant called a creeper. And a creeper is or clinger. I'm not sure. Different people call it different things. But it looks beautiful. In the fall, it looks red. Other times of the year, it's green. And sometimes it becomes yellow. And it starts at the bottom of the tree. And it grows up the tree. But the trees that have these creepers don't produce fruit, or hardly any fruit. Tree right next to it has no creepers, and it's hanging with fruit. It takes away life from us, and they bring in Mexicans and other people from other countries, and they come in, and by hand, the only way to do it is to come in and cut those creepers off. It has to be done by hand. It has to be done every year. And here's a question for your notebook. What are the creepers in your life that stops you from producing fruit? It could be our phone. It could be a relationship. It could be an attitude. But there are things that cling to us, that attach themselves to us, that actually, even though they may look beautiful, they don't really help produce fruit. It's against God's purpose. God's purpose is that you and I produce fruit. Another way that we're like a tree is if you come to my house, go up a long hill, and when we first moved there were fruit trees on both sides of the road, apple trees on both sides of the road, and in the wintertime, I would see these reddish brown looking apples that would hang from the tree that didn't come off in the fall. And there'd be snow on top of them, and sometimes ice hanging from the bottom. I called them Craigers. I don't know what the names, but they just hang on. And the wind would blow, and nothing would make them fall off. The wind would blow, ice would form on them, snow would be on them. It's very windy where we live, and so the wind would hit them, and snow and ice. Nothing would cause them to fall off. But in the springtime, life would come up through the roots, little Zoe, little water, sweet water, and it would come up through the trunk and go out the branch and go all the way out to the little stem that's holding that piece of fruit. And the moment it hits the stem, they fall. Instantly they fall. Nothing can make them fall in the natural until a little bit of life hits them and they just fall off. And that really helped me when I'm working with people with addictions and people with problems that don't seem to go away. They just need more Zoe. They need more life. If we can get that life in them, there's stuff that will fall off that they can't make fall off by themselves. There are 4 seasons, so we have, in this area, we have winter, spring. I love springtime, especially when this area, lots of blossoms for the fruit trees. And then summer, I like summer, but summer can be long. And when you look at a apple tree, for most of the summer, it looks like nothing's happening. Maybe little green apples, but it's a lot of leaf and very little fruit. And that heat, here it gets very hot in the summertime. And then, of course, in the fall, there's nice temperature and harvest and beautiful colors. The leaves turn colors. And so I need all 4 of those seasons. If it was up to me, I would have one. I would not have winter, and maybe a shorter summer. I like springtime, but I like fall. We call it fall or autumn. What do you call it in Chile? It's very beautiful in Chile in the fall, and the temperature is perfect and more comfortable. So because we have 4 seasons, there's places in America, the southern part, that they have 1 or 1.5, sometimes 2 seasons, but they don't produce the same kinds of trees that are in this area. Here, because of the hard winters, we have the best trees, and the best trees produce the best furniture. And there's trees in this area that produce bowling pins and bowling alleys, hardwood floors, cherry trees that produce beautiful furniture, but also trim work. There's ash, which is very hard. Lots of trees that produce special furniture. And so that's what we grow in this area. We have paper. We make paper in this area, but in the south they make lots of paper because their trees grow very fast. They don't have the deep winters. They don't have the deep root growth. And so they don't produce really high quality, expensive byproducts. So the wood is a kind of fruit in the sense that produces furniture. And so I happen to be reading in Revelation chapter 22, and I came to verse 22 that talks about the tree of life that's in paradise. It used to be in the Garden of Eden, but now it's in heaven. It's called the tree of life. And John saw it, and he made this note. He said there were 12 different kinds of fruit on this tree, and each had their own season that lasted 1 month. So there's some kind of time in heaven. There's some kind of, whether it's seasons, I'm not sure. I don't understand it because it's not like time like here. But I remember, I've read that many times, but I remember thinking about it. Wow, can you imagine a tree with pears and oranges and bananas and apples and 12 different kinds of fruit, but each fruit was in its own season, and it would go through that season in a month. So if you can imagine, on this tree, let's say there's apples on this side. Well, there's apples that are ready, they're red, they're ready to be picked, but there's also apples that are just blooming, and apples that are small and green, and every kind of season for the apple would go through that season in a month. So it would go from blossom to being able to eat it in about 30 days. And there's 12 different kinds of fruit. And I wasn't trying to be mystical. I wasn't trying to be spiritual. I thought, I'm not one-dimensional. There's not just one season. In this part of my life, I'm in one season. In this part of my life, I'm in another season. Mm-hmm. I'm in a season in my marriage, but then I'm a season as a pastor that's different. Even as a writer, I'm in a different season, and doing mission work, that has seasons. And so I began to write, and I wrote out, and I wasn't trying to be spiritual at all. I wrote out 12 major areas of my life, and I realized some of them are very fruitful, and some there's nothing in those areas of my life. Or there might be a blossom which says there's hope, there's potential for fruit, but there's no fruit yet. And so I was shocked to find out there were 12 major areas. I maybe should do it again and see how many areas I could write out. But sometimes your relationship with the Lord is very heavy with fruit. Sometimes nothing seems to be growing because it's in a season. And the good thing about seasons is that they never last. If you're going through a hard season, a difficult season, a season of wilderness, stay with it. It won't last. No season is permanent. It always changes. And God promised that. He said there'll always be winter and summer, springtime and harvest, always. He promises that. So I started looking at my life and I thought, boy, in this area I have all kinds of fruit. In this area I have nothing. I can't grow a grape in this area. And I started feeling better about myself because I was critical and negative and hard on myself because there's nothing growing in this ministry or this area of my life. I wanted it all. I wanted my whole life to be fruitful. But my life is not one-dimensional. There's actually many parts to my life. And there's parts of my life that are in winter and parts of my life that are in summer. What about you? Can you, in your booklet, write 1 to 12 and see how many areas of your life you can write? So you got your children, that's an area of your life. I would say even your finances might be an area of your life. And right now it may be winter in your finances, but if you wait, springtime will come. Harvest will come. You may have a ministry in one area and a ministry in another area, and they could be producing two different kinds of fruit. So we need to look at this. We need to consider all the areas of our life. We're not one-dimensional. There's nothing one-dimensional about my life. And that created hope for me. That helped me to relax a little bit. Amen?